I know I'm late to the party, but I finally started Elden Ring. And there's a lot of things I expected going into the game. A slightly janky camera, lock-on systems, enemies that are unrelenting, dying a lot, some sort of horrible twisted monster made from an amalgamation of human body parts. You know, the usual stuff that you find in a From Software game, or more accurately a Souls game. But there's also a good number of things that I wasn't expecting. And so these are some of the pleasant surprises which I found along the way. And if you want to know more about my thoughts on the game, or you're playing and might need a guide in the future, well, get subscribed, because as I keep playing and I'll learn stuff about the game, and as I learn more, I'll share that with you. And hey, maybe leave a like while you're down there to tell the YouTube algorithm to show this video to more people. So the first thing that caught me by surprise was my starting class Samurai. It feels really strong. Now, I didn't pick Samurai after meticulously researching what's the best starting class or anything like that. I picked it because overall the stats looked good, and I was familiar with the Uchigatana from Dark Souls 3. Dark Souls 3 was a very fine weapon, and turns out in Elden Ring, it's still a very fine weapon. The bleed buildup is absolutely insane, and early on, let me hit way outside my weight class, plus the Unsheathed Special came in handy for staggering powerful foes. When I reached Margit Fell, I pretty much completely stalled my progress, because that's a pretty darn tough boss. Except then I figured out that I could use a summon as a distraction, and yes, I could use my Unsheath to stagger the boss and get in a massive amount of damage with a backstab, especially because that was usually when I happened to also get a bleed proc, draining a good old chunk, I'd say about a third to a quarter of his health bar gone in an instant. Now if this is anything like Dark Souls 3, I suspect your starting class will not have a long-term impact. It'll just be what shapes your first few levels, but by level 30 or 40, the choices you've made since starting are going to be way more impactful than whatever you started with. That said, I am really happy with my choice in Samurai. The armor looks pretty darn cool, and hey, the Uchigatana is super strong. That said, the game does a really good job of presenting information to the player, providing tutorials. There's basically an optional tutorial cave, think Tutorial Island from RuneScape, but with a lot more death in it. And all of these things make Elden Ring one of the best new player experiences that I've had from software. Now personally, I probably could have skipped the tutorial. After all, I've played these games before, I know what to expect, but I wanted to see what someone completely new to this series would get, and I have to say, I'm really surprised and impressed. Because I feel like even if you're coming into this never having played a Souls game before, you'll at least get a good idea of the basics, and of course the fact that you're going to die repeatedly, just from meeting your first enemy, the functionally unwinnable boss fight of a very start of a game, and then going through the tutorial and learning how to actually do it properly. The second thing that surprised me is quality of life. You can easily teleport around the map. Your horse, in fact, provides a lot of mobility. You can just run through enemies or use your mounted attack that hits quite hard, that can be, well, let's just say impossible to aim. I've hit things with it occasionally. Most of the time I just swing wildly and miss. Sometimes I even get myself into trouble because while the horse is quite fast and mobile, the horse does not have that much health. And if you're dismounted, you can very easily end up as a sitting duck or just straight die. But hey, if you do die, a Site of Grace or a Stake of Marika will be nearby, providing an easy way to resurrect and get back into the action. I very much remember that in Dark Souls 3, you could have quite a bit of run back, especially before bosses. I like that for a lot of the open world content in Elden Ring, you don't have to run miles and miles, you can get right back into the action. There's almost always something to respawn you right where you're likely to die. This means that I don't feel punished for exploring, instead I feel encouraged to explore more because I know, hey, yeah, I'll probably die a few times, it's totally fine, I'll have a way to recover this. Something else that's really fun, as you kill groups of enemies out in the world, you gain a flask charge, making it easy to keep your health topped while exploring. Again, this means I'm encouraged to explore rather than feeling punished for doing so. Because it's not like, oh, I'm going to have to go back to the Grace to top up my flask. Nope, it's fine. My flask just gets topped up automatically. And there's a Grace nearby anyway if I do happen to use all the charges because I'm playing badly or I'm encountering an enemy for the first time and learning its moveset. So I have to say, this makes for an extremely seamless open world experience, and who knows, maybe Ubisoft could learn a thing or two here and apply that to Assassin's Creed Shadows. Now this third thing involves one of my least favorite parts of Souls games. Parrying. I suck at parrying, and parrying is extremely frustrating. I'll use it a little too early and get hit. I'll use it a little too late and get hit. In fact, in the tutorial, I could barely parry the darn enemies that you're supposed to practice parrying on. So I'm really happy that they introduced guard counters. where when you block an enemy, you can then strike with your heavy attack to immediately retaliate, and the guard counter has a higher chance to stagger. It also seems to do significantly more damage. I like this for 2 reasons. First up is, I can actually pull guard counters off. I can hit my block button, stop an enemy attack, and then retaliate. Second of all, it rewards you for being aggressive while using a shield. You can let an enemy hit you, or maybe block the last thing in the enemy's multi-hit combo, retaliate, stagger them, and then just lay into them, or backstab them, or do other things to deal damage. There's a lot of enemies that I know their overswing is large enough that after I block their hit, I can immediately guard counter and I will hit them before they get to hit me. This way, when I'm using a shield, I'm not just turtling. I'm not just cowering behind this defensive barrier. I'm waiting to attack. It's a strategic offense based on my defense. And I really like how this changes the sword and board dynamic. In Dark Souls 3, basically I played through about the first half of the game as a sword and board build. Then I swapped between sword and board on a lot of boss fights, mostly just to have the passive resistances and the ability to block annoying ranged stuff here and there. But then when I was fighting trash, instead I used an ultra greatsword. It was super slow, it was super heavy, and it staggered the shit out of everything. Now I kind of feel like I have the best of both worlds, where I can get the shield, I can block damage from that, but I can also stagger stuff really effectively using either my weapon art, unsheath, or my guard counter. And the last thing that surprised me was just how much of a difference choices made. Because I'm used to Dark Souls 3, where if you're struggling in a boss, really all you can do is farm up or keep struggling against that boss. And so in Elden Ring, it's extremely refreshing when I'm struggling against a boss to go, you know what, I'm just going to go over there for now. Or maybe I die and I'm frustrated and I say, this area is just a little bit beyond me right now. I'm sure technically I could get good and do it, but I'm just not feeling it. So I'm going to go over there and explore. And you know what? There's going to be some hard enemies, but they're going to be different hard enemies. I'm going to learn new things, and in taking a break, I'll get some time to think back on the mistakes I made, reflect a little, and do better next time. Plus, I'll probably be a couple levels higher by the time I return. A great example of this is when I was bashing my head against Market of Fell, just unsuccessful attempt after unsuccessful attempt. I went off in a different direction, I found these nifty catacombs, killed a bunch of dudes, got a bunch of stuff, had a good time, came back to Market of Fell feeling refreshed, and ended up downing the boss after, well, actually another hour and a half of attempts. So, still wasn't easy, but let me tell you that break in between was great for my sanity. And so now I'm curious. If you've already played Elden Ring, what's one thing about the game that surprised you? And if you haven't played Elden Ring yet, what about the things I mentioned? Is there anything in there that you weren't expecting? Let me know down below. And if you're looking for something else to watch, I recently gave my first impressions on Inotria, another Souls-like game, which the demo's very rough, but hey, who knows? The setting's cool, maybe in the future it has some potential. And I also talked about the top games and expansions coming out in June of 2024. Links to both of those will be up in the card and down below. Now, of course, before I go, a special thanks to my patrons and channel members for the continued support. For as low as $1 a month, you can help make videos just like this one possible. Link to support is down below. And also, a big thanks to everyone who watched to the end. I'm glad you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.